Thank you. And our next item of business is consideration of business motion 19312 in the name of Graham Day on behalf of the Bureau, setting out a revision to tomorrow's business. And can I call on Graham Day to move this motion?
Moved, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. And I think Neil Findlay wishes to comment on the motion.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. I appreciate the business is packed this week and a bit chaotic, but I wish to raise concerns about the business motion moved by Graham Day on behalf of the Government. I do so reluctantly, but with no option, as I've exhausted all other parliamentary options to force the Cabinet Secretary for Health to be held to account on an issue that she previously made a statement on in this Parliament. Excuse me. On the 26th of June, the Cabinet Secretary made a statement advising members that she welcomed the offer of US surgeon Dr Veronicus to come to Scotland, and that she had asked that we look to bring him here as soon as possible. The intention was for him to work with clinical services in a complementary fashion to provide treatment, expert advice and training. Excuse me, President Officer. Since that date, there has been little or no progress, and at the weekend, via the media, we learned Dr Veronicus has withdrawn his offer due to the appalling way he has been treated by senior Scottish Government officials, reporting to the Cabinet Secretary. All offers made by Dr Veronicus to meet surgeons and have them observe his practice as part of this process have been rejected or cancelled. He attended a conference in Gothenburg where Scottish surgeons who were supposed to liaise with him also attended and made no effort to even speak to him. He offered to meet them in London when he was in the country, and no one took up his offer. In the interim, we've seen Scottish patients have to use their life savings, having to crowdfund or rely on benefactors to allow them to travel to the US for surgery performed by him on a pro bono basis. Each of these women have it recorded in their NHS notes here that they have received full mesh removal, only for them to go on to have up to 15 centimetres of mesh removed from their body. How on earth can this happen? They need answers. At every turn, Dr Veronicus has offered to come here with only one motive, and that is to help women horribly injured and disabled by mesh, have been blocked. Why do some surgeons here not want to learn pioneering mesh removal techniques? Why do they not want to see their practice improve? Why don't they want help to help women who are desperate for help and in excruciating pain? Presiding Officer, this is the biggest medical scandal in the history of Scotland's NHS. The Cabinet Secretary has known since last Monday that Dr Veronicus will not come here, yet has made zero effort to advise this Parliament or the women of Scotland of this. Why? Presiding Officer, we need to end the games here. The Cabinet Secretary made a statement when she had good news to tell this Parliament. She must do the same and be held to account when there's bad news.
Thank you, Mr Findlay, and thank you for the advance notice. Can I call on Graham Day to respond on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau?
Presiding Officer, and indeed to respond on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, which has taken the decision around scheduling of business. I acknowledge that this subject is extremely important, but I'm not going to comment on behalf of the Government, or indeed the Bureau, on behalf of allegations in the media. As the member has acknowledged, scheduling of business, particularly around stage 3, has to take account of a variety of factors, and we are in a situation where we are extremely constrained this week. There is, of course, other options available to the member beyond seeking a statement, a range of questions, although I recognise, Presiding Officer, that's a matter for you to determine.
Thank you very much, Mr Day. I would just note to Mr Findlay that there are opportunities, including at First Minister's questions this week. Can I move on? Sorry, actually, the question now for the Chamber is that motion 19312 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. I should also draw your attention, members, to the fact that decision time tomorrow will be at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock decision time on Wednesday for the Transport Bill with a huge number of amendments. The next item of business is topical questions. Our first question is from Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the report State of Nature 2019 Scotland.
Minister Marie Goujon.
We take the decline in biodiversity seriously, and we don't want to underestimate the challenges that lie ahead of us here. We're already examining what we're currently doing to improve biodiversity, where we need to do more, and what we might need to do differently. Our performance in delivering international biodiversity targets compares favourably with the global picture, but we understand that there is more to do. We're involved in developing a new international post-2020 biodiversity framework, including hosting an international biodiversity workshop next spring. Our new programme for government included a further £2 million for the Biodiversity Challenge Fund.
Claudia Beamish.
I thank the Minister for that answer and the acknowledgement of the challenges. The State of Nature report highlights that we are failing to get to grips with the biodiversity crisis, with 11% of Scottish species classified as threatened with extinction. While we know, as the Minister has highlighted, that the Scottish Government is not on track to meet the 2020 international biodiversity targets, 13 of the 20 targets are unlikely to be met. And so could the Minister give more details of what arrangements are in place for devising a new post-2020 biodiversity action plan to fully address the environment and nature emergency?
Minister.
I thank the member for that question. I mean, she rightly highlights, there is, of course, we absolutely recognise that while we are undertaking a pile of work in this regard, there is still an awful lot more to do. And again, we are making some progress on the HE targets. We're on track to achieve seven of those and working to achieve more. Now, we do recognise the importance of biodiversity and the complexities and challenges that tackling its loss presents. And that's why in the latest programme for government, we recognise the importance of biodiversity and have demonstrated our continued commitment to an ambitious programme of actions to protect and enhance Scotland's biodiversity. Now, we are continuing to deliver on the biodiversity strategy and work towards achieving those 2020 HE targets, and as well as working with communities on projects which will benefit ecosystems and waterways and open Scotland's natural environment to more people. Because I think as much as we talk about biodiversity on land, it's also within the marine environment where that's also particularly important. And in that regard, we've consulted on the creation of 4 new marine protected areas and will designate sites early next year, and those will contribute to the protection of biodiversity and geodiversity such as Rissel's dolphins, minke whales and Scotland's marine geomorphology. And we're also going to consult on a UK-wide dolphin and porpoise conservation strategy later in the autumn. And we're taking forward our work on the seabird conservation strategy, consulting on our proposals and adopt the final strategy next year. And we're also in the middle of consulting on a deep sea marine reserve. So I hope that this answer outlines just some of the actions that we'll be taking right now and that we're taking in the immediate future to try and tackle some of the challenges that we face.
Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And the Minister highlights issues by land, air and sea, quite rightly. But the report shows that Scottish species have decreased by 49% since the Scottish data recording began in this way in 1994. And as a species champion for the forester's moth, I'm particularly concerned to read that moth numbers, for instance, are down by 25%. We need to protect and enhance vulnerable ecosystems and support this and other species. So I still ask for more detail from the Minister about how she will ensure that the Scottish Government's agencies and others will be adequately resourced, and for some more detail specifically of how the new biodiversity plans will be taken forward post-2020.
Minister.
Well, firstly, I would say that I'd be happy to meet with Claudia Beamish and any other member in the Chamber who's concerned about this and who wants to discuss the action that we're taking, because I think it's important that we work together and we work across with other public sector bodies to try and do our best here. And I really think, and another thing that we've committed to this year as well, we said that we would write to the Parliament. I believe that we would be writing to the Environment Committee by the end of this year, outlining the actions that we're taking, actions that we're looking to take, so that those can be scrutinised scrutinised by the Parliament too. We do have another of specific measures that we're looking at in relation to some of the species that Claudia Beamish mentioned, because, as we heard in that report, about 1 in 10 species are threatened with extinction. Now, in specific relation to some of those, for example, we've got Scottish Wildcat Action, which is working to address threats to wildcats from hybridisation by developing captive breeding and release schemes to strengthen wildcat populations in the wild. We have the Working for Waders project, and that has a broad range of land managers and conservationists putting in place practical work to support curlews and other wading birds. And there's work underway in the forests of the Cairngorms National Park to research the cause of declines in capercaillie numbers and to develop practical measures to support them. And there's also many other species that benefit from work done through the agri-environment climate schemes under the Scottish Rural Development Programme and projects to control non-native species. Now, a lot of these projects will be long-term and they will be ongoing, but again, I would extend that invitation to Claudia Beamish to either meet with myself or the Cabinet Secretary for the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform to discuss how we can improve on the work that we're doing and really to take that work forward.
Thank you. There are 3 members who would like to ask supplementaries. Mark Roskell to be followed by Maurice Golden.
Thank you. One of the best ways that we can reverse the catastrophic decline of nature on our farmland since the Second World War would be to convert more farmland to organic production. Is the Minister aware that in Denmark, 60% of food that is publicly procured is organic, and it provides a very strong driver for conversion? Would the Minister consider setting similar targets in Scotland for public procurement for organic farming, particularly under the new provisions in the Climate Bill?
Minister.
And in response to that, I mean, I absolutely recognise the point that Mark Driscoll makes about the organic sector, because I think one point that has been of huge concern to me is the fact that we've seen the amount of land farmed organically in Scotland reduce. So I think we've got to tackle that and to do something to try and improve the current situation that we have. So we've already committed to working on an organic sector plan, and I'm always happy to, and well, I'm actively looking at examples where looking to other countries to see what's happening there and what we can learn from these other examples. And again, I'm more than happy to discuss that with the member and to see how we progress this work going forward.
Maurice Golden to be followed by Alistair Allen.
What plans does the Scottish Government have for promoting and enhancing Scotland's island biodiversity, particularly Arran in the west of Scotland, as well as protecting it from key drivers of change, such as invasive non-native species?
Minister.
I recently appeared at the Environment Committee with regard to invasive non-native species, because we absolutely recognise the catastrophic damage the introduction of these species can cause. If there are particular issues that the member would wish to raise with me in relation to Arran or any other specific areas, I'd be more than happy to look at those and pay those particular attention. But we are undertaking, again, a great deal of work in trying to tackle invasive non-native species along with Scottish natural heritage, but again, happy to take that up with the member.
And Alistair Allen.
As alluded to by the Cabinet Secretary in her response to Ms Beamish and by the authors of the report themselves, comparisons between the countries of the UK cannot easily be made. Can she expand on how statistics are gathered and whether it is accurate to compare them?
Minister.
I think the member raises an important point there, because some of the media reporting of the State of Nature report was inaccurate. The Scottish State of Nature report 2019 is based on a separate data set and a different time period. The UK and Scottish State of Nature reports can't be compared to show that Scotland's wildlife is declining faster than in the rest of the UK. The UK report makes it clear that it's not appropriate to compare the species abundance indicator between countries because data from different taxonomic groups has been used. Now, Scottish Natural Heritage and the RSPB contacted the BBC last week to highlight the error in the reporting. Now, because I think it's also important to recognise, though, that we absolutely welcome that groundbreaking collaboration which has led to the State of Nature reports, because it's never been more important for us to work together in the face of the growing evidence of biodiversity loss around the world. And the joint news release issued on the Scottish report includes messages that it's not too late to act. But I would highlight that while there was the reporting of the State of Nature report had been inaccurate, I mean, again, while we are undertaking a lot of work, we do recognise that there is always more to do, and we are working to achieve that.
Thank you very much. I'll move on to question 2. Mike Rumbles.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will confirm the amount of service fees reportedly waived by Prestwick Airport for the United States military.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
Officer, Glasgow Prestwick Airport operates at arm's length from the Scottish Government on a commercial basis. This is essential to ensure compliance with state aid rules. Decisions on specific commercial deals are made by Prestwick without any involvement of ministers. Prestwick has been providing military handling since the 1930s, and it continues to be an important part of its overall offering. The management of the airport continue to look for opportunities to grow the business, including offering fixed-based operation services to a number of customers, all of which have been done on a commercial basis and at market rates. Generally speaking, all airports will seek to package fees and charges in a way that ensures they remain competitive. That is entirely standard practice, is consistent with Prestwick's business plan and is consistent with its aspirations to grow and to continue to play an important role in the wider Ayrshire economy.
Mike Rumbles.
Presiding Officer, it isn't good enough for the government to hide behind the fact that Prestwick is an arm's-length commercial company, or perhaps even commercial confidentiality. According to the US Defense Logistics Agency website, the US military have used over $17 million of fuel at Prestwick over the last 3 years, and the Scotsman reports that hundreds of these flights over the same period have had their service fees waived by this failing government-owned company. When was the Cabinet Secretary made aware of this situation?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I'm sure the member first of all would recognise the strategic importance of Glasgow Prestwick Airport to the Ayrshire economy and to the Scottish economy as a whole, which was part of the reason why the Scottish Government took a decision to intervene and to purchase the airport back in 2013. During the course of that time, any financial provisions which would be made available to Prestwick have been done so on a commercial basis. However, to suggest that in some way the government is hiding behind the issue of state aid rules, I must say, Presiding Officer, is frankly nonsense. In order to make sure that we comply with state aid regulations and law in this area, ministers in government cannot be involved in the commercial decisions that are made by Glasgow Prestwick Airport. What has been part of Glasgow Prestwick's work over many decades now is providing fixed-based operation services to a range of parties, including the military. And the recent success they've had with the US Air Force is a reflection of their business plan to target elements of that particular business in order to increase growth in that area. That's what they have been successful in doing so. But I must emphasise, Presiding Officer, the government is not hiding behind anything. It is meeting the requirements set out in regulations around state aid matters. And what I will not do is simply compromise that for Mike Rumbles and simply have disregard for the jobs that are crucial to the Ayrshire economy that are associated with Prestwick.
Mike Rumbles.
So the Cabinet Secretary didn't answer my question, which I wanted to know when he knew about the situation, and I'd like him to answer that when he responds again. But Prestwick Airport hasn't made a profit in any of the last 10 years. The Scottish Government has pumped in £40 million into a company which, according to Companies House, has creditors of £44 million, but assets of only £10 million. Does the Cabinet Secretary know the difference between bailing out a company with taxpayers' money in the short term in order for it to become successful and continuing to bail out a company which continues to fail?
Cabinet Secretary.
Officer, I actually find that Mike Rumbles' absolute disregard for the importance that Prestwick plays to the Ayrshire economy quite breathtaking. It is very clear that the Liberal Democrats have no political interest or interest in the wider Ayrshire economy and the importance of it. And as I have already stated to Mike Rumbles, decisions around any commercial agreements that are entered into by Prestwick and its management with a service it's providing to an operator is a commercial matter which they enter into and ministers are not party to. But it's very clear here this afternoon, Presiding Officer, the Lib Dems do not care two hoots about the Ayrshire economy and the importance of Prestwick Airport to it.
There's a degree of interest in this. There's 4 members wish to ask questions, so concise questions, concise answers. Edward Mountain, please.
Presiding Officer, the importance of Conservatives' place on Prestwick Airport cannot be doubted. The other week, Cabinet Secretary, I asked at the Rural Economy Committee which company you were offering for sale at Prestwick Airport. At that stage, you didn't know. Do you know now?
Minister, Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as it stands, these matters are commercially confidential, and as I also gave a commitment to Parliament, is that I would update them in due course should progress be made on these matters. And I'm sure the member would recognise the importance of the commercial confidentiality relating to these issues.
Patrick, point of order, Mr Mountain.
My problem is, Presiding Officer, I'm looking for an answer to a question. There are 6 companies related to Prestwick Airport, and the Cabinet Secretary must know which airport, which company he's offering for sale. I don't believe it's commercial confidentiality. I look for an answer. Is there a way, Presiding Officer, that as a member I can get an answer, because I can't get it at the committee either?
Thank you, Mr Mountain. I recognise the point that the member is making. The point of order, however, is that there are many ways to put down questions and pursue this matter. The member can pursue. Well, there are 3 other members who wish to ask a question. The member himself can raise further questions, can put down written questions, can write to the Minister, or the party can raise a motion in Parliament. So there are any number of ways of pursuing this matter, not just if the member is unhappy with the response. Patrick Harvey, to be followed by Colin Smith.
I find the nothing to see here attitude rather disturbing. Is it not offensive in a week when Scotland's Kurdish community will be protesting outside the US Embassy at the withdrawal of their forces, leaving their comrades vulnerable to attack by Turkey, at a time when the US democratic procedures are investigating conflict of interest and potential breach of the US Constitution in relation to dealings with both Prestwick and Turnberry? Is it not offensive in that context for a Scottish publicly owned asset to be effectively subsidising the military operations of a dangerous far-right regime?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it doesn't provide any subsidy, it operates on a commercial basis.
Colin Smith, to be followed by Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the Cabinet Secretary not accept, though, that in the interest of transparency, given that Prestwick is a government-owned airport, the Government should publish the full extent to which Prestwick relies on the US defence refuelling for its income, not least because if there is an over-reliance, that raises real questions about the sustainability of the airport in the future and the apparent financial recovery that we've seen in recent months, especially given the current US inquiry, which may very well lead to a reduction in usage by the American military.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, Glasgow Prestwick Airport provides the relevant information in the public domain through its published accounts. But the member will also recognise that it operates in a competitive environment, and therefore there will always be information which is commercially sensitive, information which, if it was placed in the public domain, would put them at a disadvantage over their commercial competitors. Now, I'm sure the member would not seek to undermine the commercial viability of Prestwick Airport going forward, and that's why they ensure that they meet all the necessary requirements by publishing the relevant data for their own records and their own income as part of what they publish on an annual basis through their accounts.
And Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I add comments that Prestwick Airport is vitally important to the Ayrshire economy and acknowledge that today, but it has been in public ownership since 2013. When are we likely to see it return to profit and private ownership, Cabinet Secretary? And is the Government happy for income from military purposes forming part of its future success?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Presiding Officer, a key part of trying to make sure we do the best thing with at Prestwick Airport is resisting the temptation that some members in this chamber may seek us to do, which would undermine the airport commercially and be able to actually make progress in improving its financial situation. I've been very clear, and we as a government have been very clear since we took ownership of the airport back in 2013. It was our desire for it to turn to the commercial sector. That continues to be our focus. The member will be aware that the Management Board have published an invitation of interest for those who may wish to purchase the airport. That process is presently being undertaken and being considered, the details of which I have said once we have reached a decision in these matters, that I would keep Parliament informed of these issues. And I intend to continue to do that once we're in a position to furnish Parliament with further information.
Thank you. Point of order, Mr Rumbles.
During these questions that have just taken place, five members asked specific questions of the Cabinet Secretary. None of those questions were answered. The first one I asked was, when did he know of the situation? And he wouldn't answer it. If you look at the official report when it's published, he did not answer any of the 5 questions. How are we supposed to proceed if the government won't respond to members?
Thank you, Mr Rumbles. Similarly to the point raised by Mr Mountain, I recognise the member and several members are unhappy with the Minister's responses. However, it is up to members and the viewing public to make what they will of questions and responses. If the member is still unhappy, it's certainly up to his business manager to pursue this matter, maybe to make additional time available or to put down further questions. So there are other ways to pursue this matter.